The first time I walked into the Roost, it was April of 1996, and I had no idea then what a role gay bars were going to play in my life. My name is Rob Browatzke, and this is the story about all of gay bars and the roles that they have played in my life. When I went to the Roost for the first time, I was living in Lethbridge and had come up from Lethbridge to meet a couple guys off IRC, which was a internet dating site, social site that was in use in the 90s. It was a Tuesday night, my first time at a gay bar, and I wish that I remembered more about it. I am assuming that we went on Tuesday because there was a stripper. The Roost always had strippers on Tuesday night. But I really don't remember much about the actual experience. At the time, I wasn't cluing into the fact that it was my first time in a gay bar, and certainly had no idea that gay bars were going to be as significant for me as they were. At the time, I had only been out for a couple years. I was in school, going to the school at the University of Lethbridge, was barely involved with the gay community there because there wasn't much of a gay community there. And I certainly had no intention of gay nightlife becoming my life, which is what ended up happening. At the time, like I said, I was very freshly out. I had come out in high school in 1993, so about 3 years before that, I had come out slowly, one person at a time. Some people accepted it very well, some people not so much, and every time there was one of those not so muches, I kind of pulled back a little bit. I had exploded out of the closet, and it was a complete disaster. Later on, I would refer to myself as my high school's token fag, which I think is the headline that ran with an Outlook's article about my high school coming out experience. I don't think most of the people in my high school had any idea who I was. So the fact that I was out in high school was a big deal for me. It wasn't really a big deal for anybody else. Then when I had graduated and was planning what I was doing next, all I wanted to do was get away from Fort Saskatchewan, which is where I grew up, and went to the University of Lethbridge. And Lethbridge in the mid-90s, not that it's much different now, but certainly in the mid-90s, it was very much in between very conservative Mormons and fundamentalist Christians, neither of whom wanted anything to do with gay people. And because my experience in high school had been less than ideal when it came to my sexuality, I went back into the closet. That did not last very long. And the reason that didn't last very long was that there was a guy in my Psych 1000 class who had floopy 90s hair, and he was so handsome, and he was sitting right in front of me talking about homophobes in Lethbridge and how they could kiss his big gay ass. And I'm like, he is so pretty, and the only way I'm ever going to be able to get to know him and, in my head, date him and marry him and spend the rest of my life with him and his gorgeous 90s floopy hair was if I came out again. So I started to do that again in Lethbridge by calling their gay and lesbian peer support line, which was the only thing under gay in the phone book. The phone book for you kids, it was a big paper thing that had all phone numbers in it. And they had monthly dances and weekly coffee nights. So I went to this little straight cafe in Lethbridge and sat there by myself for a couple Thursdays. I could kind of tell who the gay people were. They were usually in the back room of the coffee shop. And eventually someone came over and said, "Hey, did you want to be here for this?" And I said yes. And after that, there was not really any going back for me. By that point, I was starting to make friends. And I think that was what I had been missing in dealing with my sexuality, was being friends with other gay people, knowing any other gay people. In the 90s, that just wasn't a thing. A couple of my straight friends in high school had taken me to a place called Boys Town Cafe, which they had said was a little gay coffee shop that they knew of in Edmonton, but we didn't meet anyone. We went there and we had a drink and it was fine. So I was in a space with other gay people, but I didn't know them. That changed in Lethbridge. And then I immediately got involved in what Lethbridge's gay community was at the time. There was an organization called the Gay and Lesbian Alliance of Lethbridge and area. I quickly became the chairperson for that because everyone else on the board kind of quit, as I would learn tends to happen quite frequently in nonprofits. And that became who I was. running that organization with the other people, running those weekly coffee nights, running those monthly dances. That became who I was. That became so central and integral to who I was, being the person that created community for other people. Just became a defining moment of who I was. My degree that I was taking was an education degree because I had always been smart and good at school, and everyone told me that I should become a teacher. Coming out kind of derailed that. All I wanted to do was talk about being gay and learn about being gay and inject gayness into anything that I was taking. So I decided that I didn't really want to be a teacher. And I just kept taking courses that I was interested in until after 4 years, I ended up with a Bachelor of Arts in General Humanities that I had paid $40,000 in student loans for and has sat collecting dust in my closet ever since. And then I was done my degree and I'm like, well, okay, what do I do now with the rest of my life? And I decided that I wanted to move back home and get a gay job because I had community in Lethbridge. And I knew that I was going to be getting rid of that by moving. So to make a connection in Edmonton, I figured a job at a gay business would be the best way to do it. And there was, at the time, a group called the Edmonton Rainbow Business Association, which was a bunch of gay-owned businesses. And they put together an annual Pride pages or Pink pages, something like that. I don't remember what it was called. But I found a copy of it and started applying at places in it. And the first place that called me back for an interview was a place called the Georgia Baths. I had been to bathhouses before. I had been to F212 in Vancouver. I had been to Goliath in Calgary. I had been to Down Under in Edmonton. I wanted the job at Down Under, but the Georgia was the first one that called me back. I did not like working at the Georgia. It did not last very long. It was at a sketchy side of downtown. If I was looking for community, these were not the people that I was wanting to build my community with. It was just a no-go for me. It was just a gross couple weeks. Luckily, it was only a couple of weeks because then Eric McCorkle, who was the manager of Down Under, gave me a call and said, can you come in for an interview? And I said yes. And they hired me. And so I quit the Georgia in a less than professional way. But got a job at Down Under, which is where my life really, really changed. Down Under had opened in 1998. I had actually been there not too long after it opened. There still wasn't even power in all of the rooms. It was still under construction. It was owned by three people, Jim McBride, David Taylor, and Jim Schaefer, who those three people would go on to change my life significantly, especially Jim McBride. Jim McBride was a past monarch with the Imperial Sovereign Court of the Wild Rose. At that time, I did not know what that was. He was a dance troupe member in this group called Edmonton's Impersonation Review of the Village People, which would soon reshape my life yet again. But the three of them together had been involved in Edmonton queer nightlife for forever. And through the three of them, but particularly Jim, I started making all of the connections that I wanted in my life. And I was having a great time working at Down Under. The summer of 1999, which was in the summer I moved back and got that job, was a great summer. But the first thing that Jim got me involved in was the Village People. The Village People had started off as a fundraising troupe a few years before. They were firing one of their members. Jim's like, do you want to do it? And I'm like, I cannot dance. And anyone that I was in the Village People with or that saw the Village People perform knew that I could not dance. We will not even get me started on my difficulties with a very basic kick line. But I wanted to be part of this because it seemed like it was fun. And the people that were in it were, I was going to say young and cool. I guess they weren't all young and cool, but they were all cool. And they were all involved in Edmonton gay nightlife. And that was all that I really wanted. So I joined up. We had rehearsals on Wednesdays at the Roost, which at the time in the late 90s was the main gay dance club and gay watering hole. And that was where I would spend almost that entire summer when I wasn't at Down Under. There was Me and Jim McBride, there was Bobby who worked at the Roost, Jazzy who DJ'd at the Roost, Carl who was a manager of the Roost, and Ron Byers. And the six of us would go up and rehearse for a couple hours, and then we'd go downstairs and just get hammered together, and we would have a good time together, and we would sit around and drink, and we would talk about Village People merch that we should be putting out because we thought we were the biggest deal in the world and that everybody should have Village People mouse pads and Village People placemats. And it sounds a little delusional looking back on it now, but it was just so much fun. Now, through the Village People, I did get involved with the Imperial Sovereign Court of the Wild Rose, which is a fundraising organization that is just a little bit older than me. And even though a lot of the places that I would work and a lot of the organizations I would work with in my life would come and go, there is a common thread that kind of runs through it all, and that's my connection to the Imperial Sovereign Court of the Wild Rose. When I joined the Village People in '99, Ron was just about to run for emperor. He was convinced he was going to win this time. He had run before and lost, but he had been planning this now for 8 years, and nobody was foolish enough to run against him. He asked me to be one of the people running for his prince. I had no idea what this was about, but it sounded fun. And I said I would only do it if my good friend Jim would do it, because at that time, Jim was my boss. He was my dance troupe leader. He was my landlord. And he was kind of everything that I wanted to be in life. He just was very successful. He knew who he was. He had a confidence in him that I had never had and that I really aspired to. So I said, Ron, yes, I will be your prince if I can do it with my friend Jim. And that was how I joined the court. Over the years, I would go on to be emperor 4 times and prince twice. And I'm certain I will get back to some of those moments as it kind of comes out. Now, I had said that working at Down Under, there was 3 owners, and one of those owners was Jim Schaefer, who was an owner of a bar called Boots. We didn't spend a lot of time at Boots. It was the older bar, it was the leather bar, it was the bear bar. But I needed another job because Down Under was not paying my rent. And like I said, Jim was my landlord, and he was very insistent that I pay my rent. So I got a part-time job also working at Boots, still while working at Down Under. And I liked working at Boots. It was not a very long experience. So I was only there a couple months before Carl offered me a job working at the Roost. And the Roost was younger and the Roost was more fun, and I figured I'd make more money. And I figured, why not do all 3? I could work at Down Under, I could work at Boots, I could work at the Roost, and it'd be great. This is the life that I was wanting. There would be so much community, so much connection. What I did not know at that point was how much internal gay bar politics would redirect my life from the plan that I had in my head. And Jim Schaefer said that, no, if you're going to work at the Roost, you cannot work here. So I had to make a choice. Did I want bartending at the Roost, or did I want to stay bartending at Boots? And I opted to go with the Roost. It was the more fun option. So I had to quit Boots. It would not be the last time that I quit working for Jim. And working at the Roost was everything that I thought it would be, except the bartending shifts that I had been promised that I quit the other job for never actually materialized. Even though that was what the offer was, it ended up being some porting and deli shifts. The Roost Deli was where I spent most of my time, which I didn't mind. Even though it was kind of cut off from the rest of the adventure, it was where everybody had to come take out money because there wasn't an ATM. I don't think there was an ATM at the time that I was working at the Roost. So you had to go take out your money at the Roost Deli, and everybody wanted a Roost hot dog or a Roost burger. And so everybody would come there, and because it was a little cut off from the rest of the bar, it was quieter, and it gave me the opportunity to talk to people. And I got to bask in the glory of our 24 by 36 Village People picture that hung there on the wall, because yes, we were that pushy. So that was working at the Roost. It did not last very long either. I think it was just not compatible with other things that were going on. I was doing Village People and we needed time off for trips. I was Prince and then immediately Emperor. So I was Prince 25 for Ron and then Emperor 26. And I needed time off. And so the good thing about Village People and Court was that Jim at Down Under could influence the schedule because it was his partner Eric that did the scheduling. He didn't have quite as much power at the Roost. So I had to kind of make a choice between being a showgirl and having a job and an income, which I think any drag performer in the city can certainly relate to. It's always a bit of a challenge balancing money and glory. And I chose the glory, such as it was, the glory of being a village person. So that puts me into about 2002, 2003. In the spring of 2003, I got fired from Down Under. Was partying a little bit too much, drinking a little bit too much, and eventually enough was enough. I think looking back, part of that was just that I had been really frustrated with how dead end it had kind of become, even though I had started to do other stuff for Down Under other than just handing out towels to the guys coming in to hook up. I had started doing some of their marketing and promotions, and so I was learning some graphic design and website stuff. There had always been kind of a carrot of eventual management that had been kind of dangled in front of me, and it wasn't getting there quick enough. And I think that kind of checked me out a little bit of working there. So I got fired. Young Eric calls me on the phone and he said, "Young Rob, your services are no longer required." And that was the end of my first time at Down Under. About a month later, Eric passed away. Him firing me was the last time I ever talked to him. That was certainly the first time that I started linking grief in a big way to the experiences that I was having in working in gay nightlife. That would also become a recurring thread as more and more people in my life would pass away. In 2002, 2003, I was also still trying to find new ways to make my mark in the community. I was on the board of the Edmonton Pride Week Society in 2002, 2003. I'm assuming that probably kind of came about through my court connections. When I was Prince for Ron was also on the board for Edmonton Pride. And so that was probably the way that I kind of got involved there. 2003's Pride was nearly entirely derailed by some pretty disgusting behavior from the people that I was on the board with. There was a lot of just horrible transphobia that resulted in most of the board quitting. And then one of the people went around and talked to police and fire and the city and started canceling all the plans that we had for Pride literally months, like 2 or 3 months before things were supposed to happen, leaving me the only person on the board for that Pride season. And so I luckily at that point knew enough people in the community that had enough skills that I could be like, hey, we are in desperate need of some bodies here to help salvage 2003 Pride. And people like Mickey Wilson and Murray Billett immediately stepped up, and we had a great Pride. One of the other things that I had been doing in my time in Edmonton up to this point was writing for Times 10. Times 10 was a monthly magazine. I had met the editor again through Jim McBride. Like I said, Jim McBride was kind of my gateway drug to the rest of the city. Dennis Cambley, who was the editor for Times 10, also ran Pride Video, which is where Down Under rented all of our porn from. So I spent a lot of time going back and forth and had been writing on and off for Times 10 since 1999, not too long after I got involved with everything else here. But again, by 2003, I was looking for something more. And I think it was an issue of Times 10 that came out with a big nuclear bomb on the cover, that just kind of said, okay, this magazine is no longer what I want to be writing for. Its focus is now to American politics and less fun gay. And so I'm like, what if we had a new magazine in Edmonton? At the time, one of my good friends was a guy named Michael Brown, who was a very, very talented artist. And so we thought that my community connections and his artistic skills could come together to create a new little magazine. And that magazine was called Fresh. It came out, the first issue, I believe, in the fall of 2003, mostly financed by our boyfriends at the time, as we waited for some advertisers to come on board. Now, I was assuming, and as it turns out, I was assuming wrongly, that I would have no problem getting advertisers, because at that point I had worked for so many gay businesses that I'm sure they would all love to come on board. The problem was that the first business that we got to sign on as an advertiser was Jim Brown from Buddies and Woodies and Steamworks. And because Edmonton gay politics were the way that they were, and possibly still are, as soon as Buddies came on board, none of the other businesses would come on board. Even though I had personal connections and professional relationships with all of them, they just refused to advertise. So we ended up with Fresh Magazine coming out once a month, with ads from Buddies and Woodies and Steamworks, and Times 10 coming out once a month with ads from Down Under and Boots and the Roost. And that's what it was. It was just kind of this divide in the community. Now, that really redirected my life yet again, because of course I was going to start spending my time at the business that was supporting the business that I was trying to build. And so more and more and more, I was spending my time at Buddies. Now, by then, I was not reigning in the court. Village People were kind of on one of our many hiatuses. So some of those social connections had dissolved a little bit. And that just provided more opportunity for me to spend time at Buddies, which in the early 2000s was starting to dominate the scene. And it was certainly transforming the scene from a Roost-based scene to a Buddies-based scene. Now, Edmonton has always been very weird when it comes to dance clubs, that it was one dance club one night and one dance club the other night. And I have since learned that this is something that certainly predates my time in the city, that there was the Flashback night and there was the Roost night. But by the mid-90s, when I started going to gay bars, the Roost had a stranglehold on Saturday night that nothing could be shaken. But Friday night was Buddies night. And Friday night being Buddies night was a phrase that would sometimes haunt me for the next 20 years, but would certainly define my time at Buddies. Because Fresh pulling me into Buddies gave me a relationship with Jim Brown, who was the owner of Buddies, Woodies, and Steamworks. And one day in August of 2004, he gave me a call and he's like, hey, we are getting rid of our manager. Are you interested? Now, I thought that he was calling me in to yell at me because I had been very drunk at Buddies the night before. But the job opportunity was great because at that point we had been doing Fresh for almost a year. We were not making money. I had not been working for a while. I had done some work with Gay Men's Outreach Crew, which was like a peer education and resource for gay men for coming out and dealing with HIV and dealing with STIs. But that wasn't sustainable. So I said, yes, I would absolutely love to start managing Buddies. And that's what happened. Now, unfortunately, Fresh fell by the wayside. Like I said, we weren't making money anyway. So financially, it was not the end of the world. But it certainly was hard to lose something that we had been working on so much. Unfortunately, we had probably so financially damaged Times 10 that Times 10 didn't last much longer than Fresh did. So the creation of the one thing ended up in both of them being gone. But that started me managing Buddies. 2005, managing Buddies was probably a high point of my life. It was the hottest club in town at the time. We were stealing business from the Roost all the time. We stole their Sunday shows with our Stardust Lounge, with Binky and Vanity. So there I am. I'm running the hot bar. I have got a hot boyfriend. It is literally a high point of my life. And I spent most of my time just making sure everybody was having a great time, taking pictures of everybody. And at the end of 2005, we decided to take all of those pictures and make them into a yearbook for our New Year's theme, which was going to be the Buddies Senior Prom. And I had not anticipated how big of a project that was going to be. And I started falling behind, because I still had a job to do while I was working on this other project. And I needed more hours in the day. And I figured the only way to get those hours in the day would be to say yes when a friend and coworker said, hey, if you need to stay up a little bit later tonight, you should have some cocaine with me.